construction management and artificial intelligence research. And he also has extensive knowledge and experience in construction project cost planning and control. And he's worked on a lot of projects in the country. He also facilitates, is a facilitator for KNUSC distance learning program with the Department of Construction Management and Technology. Currently, he is pursuing a PhD in artificial intelligence and its application in contractor selection at KNUSC. Ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, let's welcome Mr. Karikari Acheamfour.
Thank you very much. I'm excited for this opportunity. Now let's go straight into the presentation. Right. So I'm presenting on end value management in construction. So the challenges that are associated with this implementation. Okay, so I'm talking about the challenges in this implementation. So I'm aware that project managers from other areas here, so most of the time I'll try to make it as generic as possible, but in most situations too, I'll be skewed towards the construction industry. Right? But the end value management principle is for all project managers. So let's get right into it. This is the presentation outline. Right. So as you all know, projects are resource intensive. So project managers mostly rely on project management techniques in monitoring, in planning the project, monitoring the project, and then also forecasting all the phases in the projects. Right. Now, studies have shown that for projects that are executed in Ghana, there are a lot of problems associated with cost overruns and then delays. So I tried as much as possible to get any references, but with our initial sessions, our first and then second speakers talked about this situation into detail. So they gave us a lot of figures. So for now, I know we are all aware of these challenges that project face in Ghana. So I'm going to deal with that. So end value management is a technique that is used to monitoring the cost of a project and then the schedule arrangement that are made for a project. So EVM is one of the most powerful tools that you ever come across in PM. Right? And then it is used almost, it is used across the country in every project, worldwide. So it's a very powerful tool. Now, it is used to improve the visibility and control of projects through monitoring. And then it helps us to execute projects with greater precision through the goals of assessment and prediction of time and budget constraints. And then if we are able to have knowledge on the implementation of EVM, it helps us to improve the business strategy so that it gets a higher competitive advantage in terms of the business aspect of our organization. So EVM is a very powerful tool. And now we are saying that without EVM, project managers will operate in a vacuum regarding their performance, or they could operate in an environment of false optimism that does not see the extent of setbacks in their project until it is too late. So there are a lot of phases involved in the project. Now, as a project manager, if we are able to be proactive in the way we manage our cost and then time, by the time the project ends, we will be able to make some decisions earlier, so that if changes need to be made to make our project more successful in terms of time and cost, we can make them at the early stages. And then EVM is a good tool for us to make those kind of proactive measures. You don't have to wait to the project end before you come back to say lesson learned to be taken to the next project, whilst that's already through. So EVM is a good tool for us to make these kind of decisions at the early stages, so that by the end of the project we can go back on track in terms of cost and then schedule. So even though there are all these benefits associated with EVM, there are some challenges that come with its implementation. Now, I was motivated to do this research because I've been using EVM on some of the projects I've been on. And then when I implemented, there are some challenges that I faced. So it motivated me to embark on this kind of research. So I decided to read on it and see the things that and the challenges that are faced when we are implementing the EVM. And I also talked to some experts, some experienced project managers on the implementation of EVM and how the challenges that they face when they are implementing it, so that I can compare with mine whatever is being written down in the future. So I came up with a list of challenges. But before we go into the challenges, I want us to look at some of the terminology that are associated with EVM. So if you understand how the implementation is, when we go to the challenges, you appreciate the kind of challenges that we are talking about. So with EVM, there are two main classifications in the terminologies. Now the first one here is the key parameters, and the second one is the Evm measures. So the key parameters are like the data we get from implementing EVM, and the measures are like the information that you get. You process data to get information. So when we process the first aspect, which are the parameters, we get information, which are the Evm measures. So the parameters are the plan value, the budget completion, the actual cost, and then the end value. These are the key parameters of EVM, or the data aspect of the EVM. So I'm not going to read the definition. I want to use a project scenario so that we understand how these things are. So assuming a client wants to install 10 air conditions, right? 10 air conditions, and then he comes to you as a project manager. He wants you to oversee the supply and installation of 10 air conditions. So we ask you for the price. And then okay, so if I install one air conditioner is at the price of, let's say, 1,000 Ghana cedis. It means that if I do 10, it will be 10,000 Ghana cedis, right? Then you go ahead and at this, I'll take 1 day to supply and install one air conditioner. So it means that the whole project is going to take me 10 days to complete, right? So as a project manager, if I decide to implement EVM, I can do so with this kind of scenario that I'm doing right now. So I'm going to use this chart to demonstrate it. So now the project is for days, and then each day I'm going to spend 1,000 Ghana cedis. So it means that after the 10 days, I'll be spending 10,000 Ghana cedis. So the first day on the project, I'll do 1,000. The second day, cumulatively, I'll do 2,000. The third day, I'll do 3,000. Goes like that up to the 10th day. So if you put this in the form of a graph, you get the initial stages. So this is a constant graph. So this will be like 1 to 10 days, and then the cost. So the first day will be 10, 20, 30, 40 as it goes, right? So 100 to the 10,000, that's the last day, right? So this is what the planned value. It's a planned value because we are planning on how we are going to execute the project, and this is the cost that are being attached to it, right? So if you plot in the graph, there is a plan on what we are going to do. And then the initial 10,000 that we calculated to be the cost of the project after completion is what we call the budget at completion. So it's a budget, right? So with the budget, you can come out to do your plan value. And your plan value is a combination of the schedule and then the cost. So you cannot actually do the plan value without the work schedule. You need to have a work schedule before you can do the plan value. So you put the cost to all the work items in the schedule. So the first day is 1,000, second day is 1,000. So the plan value comes with the schedule. So we get the plan value like this. Now, on the 5th day, you want to come and then check the progress of the work using the EVM. So assuming on the first day, like we planned, we were able to spend 1,000 to supply and fix one air condition. On the second day, we supplied, but we couldn't fix it. So we expended like 500 Ghana cedis, and it took us to the third day. The third day we came and then we fixed it at 500 cedis. So meaning that in 3 days, we've been able to do 2 air conditions. Now on the 4th day, we supplied and fixed 1 air condition, and on the 5th day, we supplied and fixed 1 air condition. Meaning that on the 5th day, we've done 4 air conditions, right? So that gives us this is the update date for the 5th day. So on the 5th day, our end value at the 5th day will be something lower than that we planned. We planned that on the 5th day we will do up to 5,000. But because of the kind of circumstances that we faced, right, we are actually doing 4,000. Right. So this is what we have on the field day as the end value. So actually, the end value is lower than what we planned. And between the planned value and then the end value, we can get some sort of insight on whether we are doing well or not. So in these situations, our end value is actually lower than our plan. So it gives us the first kind of insight that we are not on schedule. Right. So the differences between the end value and the plan value gives us a sort of information that is called the schedule difference. It's telling us that we are not on time because we decided that on the we should be doing about 5,000, but we are actually doing less. Right. And then there's another parameter that we call the actual cost. Now, the difference between the end value and the actual cost is that when the client come to site or come to where we are doing the project to pay us, he will pay us on what he has. What we have earned, what we have actually done on site. So we've done 4 air conditions, and then he said 1 air condition at 1,000 Ghana cedis. So he's going to pay us 4,000. That's the end value. But as a project manager or as a contractor fixing these air conditions, your actual cost you incurred in doing it may not be the same as the end value. That's what the client is paying you. Some other things may have affected the cost so that the cost is raising more than what you anticipated. That is what we term as the actual cost. So in this project, the actual cost is more than the planned value. So we are spending somewhere around 6,000 to fix 4 air conditions. But on the plan, we wanted to do 5 air conditions at 5,000. And then with the end value, we are doing 4. Right? So the client is going to pay us 4,000. But actually, we are spending 6,000. So on the field day, we have this kind of basic parameters that can help us to take decisions on how to go ahead to implement the project or the way forward and how we are supposed to improve our performance. So looking at this example here, we are supposed to improve our performance in terms of schedule. And then we are also supposed to improve our performance in terms of cost. So we don't wait till the project ends before we come to look at the lessons we learned from the past project and all that. We can actually take decisions here to make sure that we come on the plan value that we designed for ourselves, because the ideal situation is for us as project manager to always be on plan. Right? But as we all know, there are some risk factors that you may that may affect the project. That's away from the plan. But we always strive to meet the plan. So these are the basic parameters. So as I was saying, the difference between the end and then the plan value gives us what we call the schedule difference. And then the difference between the end value and then the actual cost gives us what we call the cost variance. So these are the kind of parameters that you can get from these data you did on the project. Right. So these data on the plan value, the schedule, the plan value, the actual cost, and then the end value can be used to calculate other form of parameters, right? The Evm measures. So these are a list of Evm measures, but my favorite one is the estimate as completion. That is the calculate the completion time for the project if work continues at the current pace. So if we continue to work as we are doing now with the air condition, this parameter will give us our completion time. So probably we plan to finish the project in 10 months, but with the current pace of work, this parameter will give us how long we will actually take to complete the project if we don't change our ways of executing the project. And the next one talks about ETC, that's the cost. So that one is similar to the schedule, but this one gives in terms of cost. To tell you how much you spend or you spend through the project if you don't change your ways at the current, at the update date. That is, at the place you are doing, at the point you are doing your monitoring. If you don't change this, it will tell you the cost that you are going to incur at the finish time. So those are my favorite parameters, but there are others that you can use to inform you on the project. So if you get information on the budget, estimate time of completion and estimate cost at completion, it helps you to make decisions as a project manager so that you don't wait till the end of the project before you implement it, but you can be proactive in making sure that these things are implemented as early as possible so that you can move back on track. So like I was saying, as I implement this EVM, I experienced some challenges, and then I talked to some experts on it, and then I also read about it, so I came up with a list of challenges, right? So the challenges I formulated in the form of a questionnaire for experts to rank them for me in terms of which one is significant to them when they are implementing it. But these were the results. Now with the background, I looked at project managers, ranking surveyors, and the rest. Let's look at this one. Right. So I asked them a question on their knowledge of EVM, if they know EVM. And then they were 55. And all of them were like, yeah, we know EVM. Now the next thing was, how frequent do you use it? Right. And I realized that majority of them didn't use the tool in question. Right. And then we had only one person who was saying that he always uses it. We will come back to the question of, do we even implement the tool? And with this data, it came back to tell us that no, we don't. Right. But with the ratings, these were the analysis. And these were the major 4 challenges that came out with the ranking. So the first one was understanding of the usage, right? It comes to not able to understand whatever the tool requires from you as a project manager, and how to even implement with the formulas and all that, right? But luckily these days, because of technology, there are software that help us with the calculations and all that. You just have to input the parameters and give you the figures. But if you don't understand the basic, you won't know which one is the end value that you are supposed to add and which one is the plan value for you to input the figures. So it all comes back to you understanding the basic parameters that are required for you to implement this. The second one was the fact that this thing is based on a lot of formulas, right? And then it's also based on the fact that, like I said earlier, without the schedule, you cannot even come down to do the plan and then the end value and all that. But we realize, this one is for construction, we realize that in our industry, right, mostly the contractors don't even prepare a project schedule, right? And even if they don't even go by it. So they plan that, okay, I'll do the substructure and then I'll move on to the pattern and all that. But you realize that you'll be doing the fence wall, right? So if you do those kind of changes in your schedule, you can't go by it to measure whether you are doing well or not, because your plan value is based on the schedule, right? So with the plan value, you did it by saying that, okay, when I'm in the first month I'll do substructure, in the second month I'll move into superstructure. So when you are doing the assessment in the first month, it's based on a substructure. But here is the case that the contractor have moved on to do the fence because he knows that that's where the profit is. So he has moved on without even finishing the substructure to do the fence wall. So when they come to site to measure what you've done, you have to measure whatever is on site so that they pay you. So they will measure part of the substructure and then they will measure whatever you did for the wall. But when it comes to this being implemented in the EVM, it cannot be used, right? The thing has, how should I use? You can't even implement it just because whatever you plan to do has not been followed. So that was the second challenge. Then there's a lot of tedious processes. But this one, because of technology, if you know how to use the technology, this one becomes easier for you. And then difficulty in obtaining all the data required. Now, between the contractor, the one executing the project, and the one who is supervising the project. So let me use a contractor and a consultant as an example. For the contractor, if he wants to get the actual cost of doing the work, right, he can get it from his data because he's the one doing the work. If I want to know the amount that I've spent in the air conditioner, I can get it because I'm the one doing it. But for the one supervising, it's difficult for him to get the actual cost because whatever he gets will be based on the plan that you give and the contractor gave you. But whatever the contractor gave the consultant includes his profits and overheads and all that. And it will be difficult for you to do deductions to know which aspect is the main work. So as a project manager supervising that project, it becomes difficult for you to get some of the parameters, especially with the actual cost, for you to do that kind of monitoring, to check the plan value with the actual cost and all that. So one of the difficulties is obtaining all the data that we require. And then secondly, even though the professionals were familiar with the concept, majority of the construction firms were not actually using it. That was one of the findings that we got from the data. Right. So based on this, we realized that Evm is a very powerful tool for PM, and it would be nice for you to implement it so that you can monitor whatever you are doing on site. But we realized that the study has shown us the challenges that we may face when we are implementing this tool. And then the professionals too, or the experts who acknowledge that the challenges are significant in terms of implementation of the Evm. So even though the professionals were familiar with the concept, they are not implementing it. So I came up with 3 recommendations, 3 categories of recommendations. Now the first recommendation will be for practice, right? How we can help practitioners in the implementation of Evm. And the second one is for academia purposes, the kind of studies that we can do to improve the implementation. And since this program is for digitalization, I also have another recommendation for digitalization. Right. So for practice, now professionals must be trained on how to use Evm. And how do we train them? PMI organizes a lot of conferences, so they can also help to organize some training sessions on the implementation of Evm, and not for only PMI and seminars. PMI can also have delegates go to other forms of seminars like engineers, Ghana Institute of Engineers, Ghana Institute of Surveyors, and all that, to actually teach them how to implement these kind of tools. This will help them to understand the processes. And with the advent of technology and IT-based program, it will be easier for them to know how to input the parameters and get things done. It will improve their processes and then their performance in terms of cost and then time. And then with academia, we want to look at these 2 things: institutional theory and behavioral theory. Now we are looking at one of the findings was that these things are not being adopted. So even if they know, right, what about adoption? Because we were not even using it. So it comes down to these 2 theories. The first theory talks about institutional theory. It's about the pressures that can be given to firms in order to implement these kind of tools. Now these pressures are in various forms. The pressures can come from competitors. So if you see that your competitor is implementing this thing and then it's helping you, it coerces you to implement such a strategy. Then some of the pressures too can come from the client that we are taking the project from. And they are in the conditions of the contract. It is part of the fact that you have to use this tool. Then, as a firm, you will be forced to learn how to use them and then implement on the project. So those are the pressures that the institutional theory talks about. Those pressures. And then the second theory is the behavioral game theory. Now that one is an interesting theory. It talks about the fact that when we are making decisions as a firm, which is based on collective, what your other people are doing. So it says that collective irrationality can become right. So if we are all not doing it, that means that no one will be even motivated to use it. So we look at how this one affects the adoption of Evm. So we can actually research into how these things can be used as a way to enhance the way Evm is adopted in our project management processes. Now another one is, like I was saying, as a project manager who is with a consulting firm or who is actually supervising the project, it's difficult for you to get all the data required. So we should find a way. It's called a practice gap. So we should find a way to bridge that gap. It's a difficult thing because there's no way a contractor is going to let you know his problem overhead so that he puts deductions to know the actual cost and all that. But in terms of, we can come up with a better way for us to break that gap so that as a supervisor and as the one executing the project, we can get all the parameters we need so that in terms of monitoring the project, in terms of cost and then schedule, we get all the parameters required to do. And then for digitalization, now when we are implementing Evm, there are a lot of data that comes out, right? The plan value, the end value and all that. And then if you do it over a period of time, it gives you a huge bank of data. Now what can you do with this data? The implementation of Evm is for specific projects. So if I'm on this project, I'll use Evm and get results in the project like that. But if we get a huge bank of data, right? We can actually get insights from all that data that we've collected. So in terms of the implementations or the things that we are supposed to do to improve the performance, those kind of insights coming from the data will help us in the implementation of future projects. EVM practice right now is for a current project, but what are the things that can help us in our future projects? So this kind of data that we collect over time can give us insight that, okay, if we are doing this kind of project within this duration or within this time of the project, the schedule is going to be this way, or the cost is going to be to look at. So the focus should be here and all that. Those ones come from data that we've collected over time. So if we have all those, if we implement the EVM, we get all that data over time. We'll be able to use all these visualization tools like the data analytics and the machine learning tools to give us insights and of all the data for future projects, so that as project managers we have enough data to give us informed information to any client that we are working with. So EVM is a very powerful tool that as project manager we should know how to implement it, and we should know how we get useful information from this to help us in our daily management of the project. And this is not the only tool that we can talk of, right? We have the scheduling tools, right? These days you don't even see most construction firms using the scheduling tools and all that. So as project manager we should work best in all these so that we can always expedite our processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karikari. Thank you so much. So, it's question time. If you have any question, you can alert us, then you ask questions. And please, for this information is for those on the virtual. The time, if the time cuts, please kindly rejoin, because it started because we were a bit late. It will cut, and then you have to rejoin to enjoy the session. Thank you very much. Please.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for the wonderful presentation. Maybe another challenge that, per my experience, I would like to mention is with regards to how we manage performance correction in our project management. So what I have noticed with the EVM is that when we encounter variances in our projects, immediately what we do is we change the plan. So, you know, this one you are talking with respect to a particular baseline, the original baseline, on the assumption that that baseline has not changed. Now, what is happening, the real challenge that we normally face is that the moment we know that it is passing 1 day, we are delayed by 5 days, we change the plan. So the plan is not giving us the real perspective of what is happening. So you have a plan, and yes, the plan is looking good. Rather than we looking at the schedule variances or the cost variances as project managers, to sit down with the team to see the strategies that we are going to use to correct them, what we do is we change the baseline. So it is one of the key challenges we have. So maybe you can add to that, then we can also note that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, please? Any other question or contribution?
Thank you, Mr. Karikari. Yeah, I know that projects create projects. And when you are working on projects, like, as you have explained, that maybe you are to fix one condition maybe for 10 days. And there's a technical that's delayed the project. I think that the thing we have to do is that there's room for change. If you can alert the sponsor that is the challenge you are facing on the project. So this, instead of 10 days or 20 days, is going to be more than 20 days. So if he agree on the change, then you can also do your EVM very well to accomplish the target that you are supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You just before you went into the tail end of your presentation, you mentioned some scheduling too. What would you or what tools would you recommend for end value management beyond the scheduling tool? And just to add to the discussion on the baseline management, I think first of all we will need to clearly establish what our change management processes are. So where you have changes in your schedule, it is prudent to change your schedule. But before you change your schedule, the initial schedule you have should be your primary baseline. And once you set that in your scheduling software, that becomes a guide. So your change schedule becomes your new schedule that you are working with. And you can measure your baseline against your new schedule. But I would want some feedback on the end value management tools that can help with our performance.
Would you like to take the next question?
Thank you very much. Mine is more of a contribution to all that has been said. Basically, as professionals, we want to do the standard. And as I hear, sometimes we change schedules. And my good friend, the one who just spoke before me, tried to, or has established the fact that we need to do that by the use of the established change management procedure. As you mentioned there are certain parameters, the data sources that we use for the end value management. So from the word go, if you change the schedule anyhow, the basis of the end value calculation is thrown off. Because what planned value are you going to compare whatever you are talking about to? So the best practice is for us to, once a baseline is established, that baseline is frozen. We don't change the baseline. There are certain conditions that permit you to change the baseline. For example, when there are drastic design changes, then we have to go back using the change management procedures to do another baseline. And we call that baseline 1. So whatever analysis you are doing, you will do those calculations based on the current baseline. Otherwise, you'll be mixing apples with oranges. And as we all know, mathematics is mathematics. Once you start messing things up, you are just off and you are just looking at something else. So it is important that we follow the regime of the change management procedure. Once we follow that, we are able to do calculations that are really reflective of what we say the values are. Otherwise, we are just going in circles without achieving anything. And in terms of talking about the analytics, the use of data and all of that, and one of our colleagues mentioned, I'm sure the MS project is able to help us do that. Another powerful software we have is the Primavera that can also help you and take a lot of the headache. So if you are sticking to the procedure and making sure that the plan is the plan, it's not changed, once you input the data in the software, it should be able to give you what you're looking for. Now, for example, in Primavera, or in some of even Excel and all of that, you are even able to use Monte Carlo. It's another simulation software that can give you the likely outcome of a project in about 500 different scenarios to predict the possible cost or the timeline by which a project will be completed. So it is not a haphazard approach, but it is something that is very, very controlled. That is what I wanted to add to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Most of my questions have been answered about the tools Primavera and Microsoft project. Now about the first question, talking about the fact that people try to change their instead of making corrections to whatever they want to do, they change it to suit, they change the pattern to make sure that they get on track. So that's what I was talking about. If we get the consultants and the contractors using the same tools to manage it, then you can get some checks and balances. But in this case, you get only the one executing the project doing it, because it's difficult for the consulting agencies to get the parameters to even use the EVM. So all in all, what we are saying is that this is something that we have to look at as the EVM as a tool for project management. It's something that we have to look at and we.
Time is up. We have to move to the next session.